to work is learning to trust. Legacy life, secure and bright. Dreams take shape with every insight. Rules and assets, life insurance plans. Building for your future with expert hands. So that's money and more. Building wealth with knowledge and reward. Asset protection plans to grow. Dream and watch your dreams overflow. From saving today to trust for life. Breaking generational wealth divides. Healthcare directives, banking tips. We're here to help your fortune eclipse. From saving today to trust for life. Breaking generational wealth divides. Healthcare directives, banking tips. We're here to help your fortune eclipse. So tune in now, it's time to learn. So wisdom's your return. Invest, protect, and thrive for sure. Signing off is your top money and
good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to another edition of Soul Talks Money and More. I am your host, Dr. Sabrina Edmon Williams, educator, author, and investor, opening minds and closing contracts. I am so noted, and I am so excited and so delighted to be here on this first Monday in August. Mr. Armstrong, did you hear me say August? I mean, this year is passing us on by, you guys. So we've got some work to do because we have a lot of things to talk about today and throughout the rest of the year. So please, please, please continue to tune in every Monday, whether you're tuning in on the radio or via social media. We have a lot of things to discuss, and I'm so excited about this conversation today because I think, I think we finally got our guest on the phone on hold. We got that figured out in about 60 seconds. So we're doing good this morning. But I have a simple question that I want to ask this morning. So I need you to go ahead, call a friend, text a friend, tell them Dr. Williams is on the radio, and it is time for us to learn. Class is in session. So this morning, just a simple question. When did struggling alone become a badge of honor? Let me ask that question again because I know some people are still just waking up, just tuning in. When did struggling alone become a badge of honor? Every month, millions of families are fighting to pay rent, utilities, groceries, insurance, daycare, student loans, and medical bills. And you guys, we know inflation has stretched the family budgets to their breaking point. Housing costs continue to climb, and many young adults, even those with college degrees and full-time jobs, simply cannot afford to live independently. That's just the reality of where we are today. Yet, many of us still believe that success means everyone should have their own place, even if it means living paycheck to paycheck, because that's the way I did it. My mom and dad told me when I turned 18, I had to get out and figure it out on my own. So that's what my kids are supposed to do, right? Does that sound familiar? Even if it means living paycheck to paycheck. But what if we've actually confused independence with prosperity? What if we have them confused? In my book, Learning to Trust, I share something that my mother has often said, which is she could not remember a time growing up when there was an extended family living in their home, someone who was not her parents' children, whether that was a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, or cousins. There was always someone else living in the family home. Now, think about it. This is probably during the 40s, the 50s. And my grandparents certainly were not wealthy by any means. Their house was much smaller than many of our houses today. You know, I find that really funny sometimes. I think about that Back in the day, people had smaller houses. In many instances, they may have had a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom house, and you had, 10, 12 people living inside that house. And now we have 4 and 5-bedroom houses and 2 people living in the house. Just make that make sense, okay? Their houses were much smaller than the ones we live in today. They had fewer conveniences. They didn't have a microwave and a dishwasher. We were the dishwashers in the house. They had fewer resources and much less money. But somehow, they seemed to make it work. They made it work. And more importantly, they survived together. But today, 2026, many families, as I say, we have 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom homes occupied by 1, sometimes 2 people, while our adult children are struggling to pay rent. Grandparents are struggling on fixed incomes, and grandchildren are being raised in separate households, all while everybody is financially stressed. We all stressed out, but we all trying to do it by ourselves. So maybe the question isn't whether we have enough resources. Perhaps the question is whether we're using the resources we already have wisely. Now, let me be clear, just for those who are just tuning in and may have caught the middle of what I was saying, we're going somewhere here. Every family situation is different, you guys. I get that. Not every household should live together. Healthy boundaries do matter. Safety matters. And relationships matter. I want to go ahead and say that from the start. I understand that. But perhaps we've dismissed multi-generational living so quickly that we've overlooked the economic advantages it can provide when done intentionally, done with intention. Now, around the world, and even here in America, many families build wealth by pooling resources. Many families do. Several generations contribute toward housing, childcare, transportation, elder care, and savings. Instead of every household paying everything separately, they reduce expenses together and invest more for the future. Could that approach help more Black families build wealth in today's economy? Could that simply help us to weather today's economy? Could sharing expenses for a season, not a lifetime, a season, help someone eliminate debt, buy their first home, start a business, or save for retirement? Could collective economics become a pathway to collective wealth? That's exactly what we're talking about this morning. That's exactly what we're going to be talking about this morning. So I need you to go ahead, tune in. As I say, call a friend, hit somebody up, because we're having a serious conversation this morning on collective economics and what that could potentially look like for Black families, especially in today's economy. Now, I'm so excited because joining me today are 2 outstanding guests who bring both professional expertise and personal experience to this conversation. Now, you guys have heard Steve Harvey talk about his nephew, Tommy. Well, this morning, my nephew, Mr. Patrick Black, is going to be joining us. And I'm so excited about that because my nephew, Patrick Black, is a licensed clinical social worker, retired military veteran, and a father of 3 adult sons. He understands both the financial realities families face and the emotional dynamics that come with multi-generational living under one roof. So I couldn't think of anybody else to that I wanted to really invite to this conversation beyond Mr. Patrick Black. But now, the way Pat does it, as humble as he is, Pat says, Auntie, I couldn't do this thing by myself without inviting a friend that could also bring another perspective to the conversation. So also joining us is licensed practicing counselor, Mr. Eric Thompson, who's also a former law enforcement officer and the father of an adult daughter. He works with individuals and families navigating relationships, communication, as well as mental wellness. And together this morning, we're going to have an honest conversation. Now, if you don't want honesty, tune in to somebody else's show, somebody else's station. Because here on WNPR 90.1 FM, we're going to give it to you. We're going to tell it to you like it is. Honest conversation about family, finances, pride, independence, boundaries, and whether it's time for us to rethink what success really looks like. So I need you to stay with us because this conversation could change the way your family thinks about wealth for generations to come. Now, if I can do this without messing up, we're going to see if we can't take them off hold. Okay, I did mess up. So I didn't do that correctly. Don't want to do that. Okay, Mr. Armstrong, help me out over here. I'm supposed to push the red button, right? And that's exactly what I did. I pushed the red. They're there. But when I push it, okay. Hello?
There is no call in the queue.
No.
Thank you.
Okay, we got to figure this one out, you guys. Just give me one moment to get this right, because nothing up here is red. Hello?
There is no call in the queue.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, once we get this figured out, they're going to join us live. So y'all just hang in here, hang in and hang on. Charge it to my head, not to my heart. I'm pushing the red button like I was told to do, and I don't see anyone answering on this call. So it's going to be parked in just a second. But now while we are waiting, go on and text somebody, call somebody. We want our family to be a part of this conversation because there are some of us that's out there literally struggling, trying to figure out how we are going to pay rent this month, or trying to figure out how we're going to keep the mortgage going, when perhaps we need to think more in terms of collective economics. And that's what we're talking about today, what it looks like when we pool our resources. Other communities do it, you guys. And sometimes we even find ourselves guilty of laughing at other people when we see them co-living or sharing a car together. Hold on one second. I think we got them on the line. Good morning, WNPR.
Good morning. Good morning, Dr. Williams. How are you?
Good morning. I am very well, especially now that I have the two of you on the phone. Good morning and welcome to the show. So go ahead. I have given a semi-introduction of you. I'm going to allow you to introduce yourselves as well. I'll start with you, Nephew Pat.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be on your show, Dr. Williams. Thank you so much for inviting me. I am Patrick Black. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. Love my job, love working with people. Prior to becoming a licensed clinical social worker, I spent 20 years in the military. It was one of the best decisions that I could have made. It taught me a lot. It's like a second mom and a dad to me. And married, been married for about 36 years and the father of 3 boys. So I, bring a lot of experience to the table.
Well, thank you.
You topic today.
You do. And as I say, I wanted you to be a part of this conversation because I do feel like you bring so much to the conversation. And thank you for joining us. Mr. Thompson, if you would introduce yourself to our guests.
Yes, good morning, Dr. Williams. I am Eric Thompson, and I am a practicing therapist I work with all age groups, and I am 24 years ex-law enforcement. So in the midst of my career, I've seen families at their best, and I've also seen families at the worst. And I think that the topics that we're talking about this morning is so important for the livelihood and the survival of Black families. So I'm very honored to be a part of this conversation.
Welcome. Thank you so much, and welcome to the show. Now, let's jump right into this conversation because, as I say, we only have an hour to peel this thing back, and this can go a lot of different ways. So we got to cover a lot of material really quickly here. Now, we know that the economy has changed, and it has changed very rapidly. And I just want to ask you for your perspectives, and I'll allow each one of you, just for purposes of time, when I ask the question, give me about a 60-second or so response so that we can kind of move through the conversation. What in your view has changed economically that makes this conversation more relevant today than perhaps even a year ago or even a couple of years ago? What do you see? And even in patients that you may be dealing with, stresses that are being shared with you, what is making this particular conversation more relevant? And I'll defer to you this time, Mr. Thompson.
I think what is making things more relevant is that we have gotten away from what the definition of family is. So we know every generation, years ago, things cost more, things are always going to go up. But I think that we're not approaching it as a family unit. We're not approaching it with those type of expectations. We're not figuring out the problem together. We're generational gaps here. So I think the younger generation is seeing it different. And as a family, we're not putting those different ideas and those different values and mores together to come up with a solid plan for the family. And I think that's the problem. The problem is not economics as far as things going up, because we know that that's going to happen. But how we approach it as a unit, I think, is what's really hurting the family.
And that's interesting that you should say that, that we're not approaching it as a family. So the question then leads to, what are we really building on? How many of us are really sitting down with our families and mapping out a plan, a financial plan for the direction in which our families should go? And so, Pat, I'm gonna shift the question a little bit for you. We're gonna move on off that one. So that desire for independence, you hear people say, you raise up the kids and you get them to 18. I remember a friend saying that when my kids turn 18, they got to go somewhere. They can't stay here. I'm kicking them out the nest. So is our desire for independence helping us financially, or is it actually hurting us? What are your thoughts?
I think that, desire for independence, it can both help and hurt. If you have the desire for independence and you're willing to listen on advice, then it could help you. Sometimes I see, in my field that a lot of young people jump out there, and the parents or someone older have more experience. They're giving them sound advice, but they tend to want to do what they want to do, and they find themselves, in financial hardship, where if they had just listened, they, wouldn't have been able to do that. And then that results in what I call the 285 effect. That's an interstate here in Atlanta that goes around, and if you don't get off somewhere, you end up right back where you started from. So I think it could help if you're willing to listen to sound advice, and it could hurt you if you are unwilling to listen to sound advice.
I'm gonna have to borrow that one, nephew, the 285 effect. I like that one. So, Mr. Thompson, let me ask you this, because right now what I'm seeing is a lot of younger people that I'm concerned about. And I'll tell you why. As a real estate investor, I saw prices for rentals significantly increase during the pandemic. And unfortunately, 6 years later, those prices have not come down. So I see a lot of young people out there struggling to pay rent. Even here in a state like Mississippi, which is often at the bottom when it comes to economics, there are rentals here anywhere from $1,200 to $1,500 a month, and some upwards of that. So with having to pay such a high amount in rent, the question becomes, how do you ever save any money for a down payment on a home? But the idea for a lot of people of moving back home is kind of like a stigma. So, Mr. Thompson, from your perspective professionally, why do you think so many people feel ashamed about the idea of moving back home?
I think people feel ashamed of moving back home because of, I think, the trainings that our generation in the past, long time ago, home was always considered a safe space. You should be able to go home. Home wouldn't be considered a failure. If you got sick, lost your job, if you got divorced and had to move home, home was always supposed to be just that. It's a safe place. You can go back home. I think what happened was when that person came back home, the whole unit did not discuss what is the plan. How do we help you get back on your feet? But this is the expectation of the home. This is the rules, the boundaries that are set in the home. I don't think we've taught the younger generation those type of things. Yeah, we did say at 18, you leave the nest, you go out, you make this world your own. But we didn't talk about those pitfalls, those downfalls, those things that could actually happen once you get in the real world. So I think part of the problem is we didn't prepare, and we're not, even to today, preparing the generation to say, once you get out there, this could happen, this will happen. But if that's the case, as a family, we got you. So I think it became a negative because we stopped approaching it. You know, we were quick to say, well, that generation. Well, you know, we have generations, but one thing that never, ever changes is boundaries, the importance of family and how we together can solve anything. So if we're not teaching them family, yeah, I'm a little embarrassed. I lost my job. I'm losing my marriage. And we have not said, no matter what happens, as a family, we got this.
Yeah, and that's so important. That's the one thing that I take pride in. Just the fact that I have parents that are still alive, even though they are advancing in age. They have always made me feel like I can come home. If I can't go anywhere else in this world, I can go home. And that's a wonderful feeling when you have that. I know a lot of people don't have that, but when you do have that, that does bring up something that we have to kind of consider here, because you mentioned boundaries. So, nephew, question, as a father of 3 sons, you know, we talk about our children all the time and the things that we have done and the sacrifices that we continue to make to help our children. But how do you balance helping your children without, quote unquote, enabling them?
That's a very good question. And it seems like, you know, parents that are in, you know, that are in my generation, or well, what I'm seeing a lot of today is that a lot of parents are raising, and not all, but I see a lot of parents are raising their kids based motion. As you stated, earlier, show that, your family, most families are way of doing things. You got to do something. You got to, move. You got to move out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So sometimes, those things were put to you kind of harshly, for some. And so what tends to happen is that we, as parents, or a lot of parents, don't want their kids to maybe experience the hardships that they experienced. They want to make things a little easier. And so when the kids fall or they, get into a jam, sometimes parents are quick to help, to step in and fix the problem instead of allowing the kid to fix the problem themselves. So I had to learn that. I had to learn to kind of step back and let my boys, start fixing things on their own, because I have to admit it was a learning. Mm-hmm. I had to really step back and allow them to start fixing things on their own. I didn't want them to end up on 285, because you will end up right back where you started. Mm-hmm. And another thing that I had to learn was to listen to understand. And in order to help someone and not enabling them, you have to understand that, they're in a different generation than I am, that I grew up in. So I had to really listen in order to help them and not always be understood, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because sometimes as parents, we do that. We listen to respond. Because we come from that do as I say generation, so we're not necessarily listening to understand just because our parents, that's just not what our experience was. Mr. Armstrong, I know you came from that generation where it was, you do it because I said so. You don't think about it, you just do it. But, we do have to think about how we can help our children without enabling them. And I like the way you put it, Mr. Thompson, boundaries. And boundaries are good, and they need to be healthy boundaries as well. So I want to ask you, how do those healthy boundaries determine whether multi-generational living succeeds or fail? Because we've seen it happen. We know that, as I say, my mother said, there were always multi-generations in her household, and it worked. But how do we set those healthy boundaries? Because we want it to work.
Well, we get the healthy boundaries by starting early. I don't think we can really get healthy boundaries in a peaceful way if we're starting late teens, early adulthood. I think that in our history, in our past, we had multicultural, we had multi-generational living together because we understood what was coming at the family. We understood the dollar was short. We understood it was like a bicycle wheel. Everybody was a spoke, and everybody had a role to play in order for us to go round and round and round. So I think that was different because, as you said, listen to what I say. That was training. Not to say it was the best way, but it was still training. As a family, we knew. You knew your place. You knew what the rules were. You knew what the expectation was. You knew if you stepped outside that rule, there would be a consequence. But that was early on. I think we have to get back to the basics of raising and preparing our kids. I don't think they're prepared. And yes, generations will change, but we still have to train. We still have to teach. Because remember, the only one that's going to teach is you. The world, and in my law enforcement career, that's going to teach you another whole lesson. Mm-hmm. So we were being taught from birth on so that when we were told to leave, that we were prepared. We understood the value of a dollar. So when we get back under the same roof, we have to get back to setting good, healthy boundaries and training. It's just a little bit harder when we start to train an adult.
Mm-hmm. And I think, to your point, and let me just be clear, everybody. Again, this is an educational platform. We're talking honesty here. Most of us as parents, I think that's why grandparenting is such a wonderful thing. I finally figured it out now that I'm a grandparent, because you get a chance to correct all of that stuff, those mistakes you made with your children. There's not really, other than the Bible, a guide for parenting. You just kind of figure stuff out as you go. And so a lot of times conversations that we should be having, we really are not having those type of conversations with our children. For example, I can remember even during the pandemic, right before it happened, my oldest son had moved to Louisiana and gotten a job in the auto sales industry. Was doing very well, was excited, calling me every day, telling me all about the cars, all about his customers, telling me he literally had a customer that he just sold a car to give him a tip. Go figure who does that. So he could have potentially been very good at it, but then this thing called a pandemic happened, and of course people were laying people off because we didn't know what was going on. And, the last hired, first fired. So I remember going through a period where he was very down, probably semi-depressed, because he was trying to figure out, well, what did I do wrong? It's, I thought I was doing everything right and they let me go. What exactly is going on here? So I think as a parent, we have to start having conversations around what I like to call a family recovery plan. Are we communicating that to our children, that should you lose that job, it's okay to come back home and get yourself together? But now what's not okay is for you to be here, 20 years from now, sleeping on my couch. That is not okay. That is not part of the family recovery plan. So, nephew, let me ask you, because you have children, three sons, and there have been times when they've had to come in and out of your house. I know that. What expectations should parents and adult children establish before living together?
As I think Eric kind of touched on that a little earlier in the conversation, you have to have a plan. You have to have a plan in place prior to children coming back into the home. You don't have to, but it works when you have a plan.
Okay, so hold on. Let's be specific here. Class is in session. Somebody's taking notes over there. So let's be specific. Do they need to pay rent, or should they just be there?
Once they get a job, if they have a job, then they should. It's going to vary, but they should, because it's teaching them responsibility. Training starts at home.
Exactly.
It starts at home. If
Exactly.
you don't teach at home, then when they get out, and they decide to move back out, there's a great chance that, I didn't pay rent at home, so I'll miss a rent here. I'll pay, I don't have to pay rent. I can always go back home. So yes, they should pay rent. They should. I'm not saying that you would charge them, the whole $2,000, whatever it is that they're paying, but at least pay a percentage. And if you are a parent that, don't really need the help, you can set that money aside to kind of help them get started, but you have to teach them some type of responsibility to keep them over 285. When they come in, you have to establish boundaries. Boundaries are very important. Let's say, for instance, if you have to be at work at 8 o'clock in the morning, you don't want anybody coming in and out of your house, all time of the night.
Mm-hmm.
So, you have to set boundaries like that. Rules have to be set in place, and best to establish those rules prior to them moving back home, because once they move back home and you're there for a month and then you start and set those boundaries and those rules, a lot of times it causes conflict.
It does.
So,
it does.
yes.
I agree. And now, I mean, to your point.
Dr. Williams,
Go ahead, Mr. Thompson.
I think on that same note, you mentioned a couple of things, and you mentioned shame, you mentioned family recovery plan. And when that person moved back home, we went straight to financial, but we also got to go to the mental health side of that. You mentioned your nephew who lost his job. When he gets back in the home, that's our job. We have to heal him as a family. We have to talk about his mental health. Yeah, we're going to go into the boundaries of what you got to pay. And if you're here, curfew still is in place and you can't But at no point have we start discussing that part of that recovery plan has to be that person's mental health.
Good point.
So we got to get in there and talk. And he was flying high and of no actions of his own, now he's without a job. He's back home with mama and daddy. So we as a family got to be, we got to get into also starting to always put mental health as one of the first priorities of what we start to address.
Good point. Good point. And I'm looking at the clock. Mr. Armstrong, now you didn't even give me a signal. This thing just got good to me over here. We have got to take a quick break. On the other side of the break, we are going to shift the conversation just a little bit to collective economics. So please don't leave. Come on back.
There's a line, grab your coffee, let's take a ride. It's wealth and wisdom, time will rise. Author, investor, educator, team, sharing the wealth, building things you should do. From trust to banking, it's all a must. Your guide to wealth is learning to trust. Legacy matters, secure it right. Dreams take shape with every insight. Rules and assets, life insurance plans, building for your future with expert hands. Soon as money and more, building wealth with knowledge galore. Asset protection plans to move, dream and watch your dreams overflow. From saving today to trust for life, breaking generational wealth divides. Healthcare directives, banking tips, we're here to help your fortune eclipse. From saving today to trust for life, breaking generational wealth divides. Healthcare directives, banking tips, we're here to help your fortune eclipse. And now it's time to learn, so wisdom's your return. Invest, protect, and thrive for sure. Signing off is Soul Talks Money and More.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. We are on the other side of the break. You have tuned into Soul Talks Money and More. I am your host, Dr. Sabrina Edmon Williams, educator, author, and investor, opening minds and closing contracts. I am a licensed practicing counselor to help us. And right before the break, we were talking about an example that I used of what happened with my son right before the pandemic when he got his first really real job. He was in auto sales, really enjoying himself, selling cars, doing great. And then boom, the pandemic happens. He's now without a job. And Mr. Thompson brought out the fact that in helping our children to heal, part of that looks like addressing their mental health. We can bring them back into safe spaces, into a safe environment, back into our homes, but we have to address mental issues that they may be facing. So Mr. Thompson, again, welcome to the show. Mr. Black, welcome to the show. Let's jump back into that really quick, and then we're going to shift the conversation just a little bit because I got to keep my eye on the clock. I just saw Mr. Hart walk in the studio, and I can't upset him. He's the man, you guys. I got to make sure I stay on track. So let's talk about that mental health piece again, Mr. Thompson, if you will.
Okay, so I think that, we've gotten away from that round table, the dinner table, generational, a lot of big decisions were made at a dinner table. So sitting that young man, that young woman back down at that dinner table and saying, talk to us. A lot of times, we ask people, how you doing? and they say, I'm okay. Well, that's the to-go-to answer. But mentally, he's not okay. She's not okay. So then we have to then address, what does that mean? How can you be okay? You had money. Now you don't. You had a job. Now you're back out on the pavement. And talking that thing through. Pride is a very, very big thing that stops young people and old from asking for help, reaching their hand out, or being able to say, I'm not okay. So I think that once we bring them back, it's that family table that we sit at, and we really be honest. We really go into, how are you? And don't take I'm okay as an answer.
Okay. Thank you for that. Let's kind of shift, as I say, to collective economics, because I want us to think about something. As I said, I watched, just like you guys, the rents around the country just went to another side, another dimension. They skyrocketed after the pandemic. And, people are now paying, in some instances, astronomical amounts when they are renting. So here's a scenario. If 4 adults each are paying $1,500 a month in rent separately, that's $6,000 leaving the family every month. What could actually happen if even part of that money stayed within the family? Just part of that $6,000. And remember, if we don't own the rental properties that our children are renting, that means it's leaving our community a lot of times, going to somebody else's community. So, nephew, I'll throw that one to you. What could happen if even part of that money, and we'll just use that example, four adults each paying $1,500 a month, $6,000 in total, what could happen if even part of that money stayed within our family?
And if you could learn, you could invest that money for generational wealth. In doing that, you would have to be willing to educate yourself. A lot of people don't know how to do that, but you can invest that. We talk about generational wealth, which is something that a lot of times we don't see in our community. But just invest it. You could take that money and you could help your child or people that are living with you to get out, to get to buy their own home. We see that happening in other cultures. We just have to take the time to learn how to do that. So that would solve a lot of issues, or help out a lot, if we just learn to invest and to think about long term.
Yeah, and I'm working on a major project right now with another community, the Indians, who, as we know, a lot of times they own or have a significant ownership in hotels around the country. And so in developing a relationship, I have had the opportunity to just kind of pick their brains and ask them about how they get their start. And one of the responses that I've had to that question is, it does involve pooling resources to help each other to buy their first investment property. And that's something that I don't see a lot of in our community. I'm not saying that it does not happen, so don't come ringing my phone or blowing up my text saying, yes, we do. Yes, we do. I'm not saying that it does not happen. I'm simply saying it does not happen enough. It does not happen enough for various reasons. I get that. One of those is because there is an inherent distrust among us of us. But that's a whole nother show, a whole nother conversation right there. My question, though, is, Mr. Thompson, could families use those pool resources? If we were able and willing to pool those resources, could we use those resources to help each other strategically buy homes, start businesses, or purchase investment properties?
Of course. I think that we, as an older generation, have wisdom. And so you talked about cultures. Other cultures started very early. You will go to school, you will become this, you would become that. You know, they didn't just start this, and we've talked about pandemic and the changes. And once the pandemic was over, we all went back to life as usual. We could have used that time as well to have those family Zooms on what's going to change, what has changed. So I think that we can definitely learn from other cultures and how other people do things when it's bringing all that money back under one roof. And then what does that look like? But I think for people that are listening that have younger children, it's starting very early on why we're doing what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. It's not so much you will do as I say and you will give me your money. No, why are we putting it together? What's the plan? And we just don't seem to have a plan. When pandemic was over, people went back to a different world, something we had not been accustomed to in this country, which was higher prices. We didn't check in with each other's mental health. People were losing it. So I think that, yeah, we can always learn. As a Black culture, we are stronger together than we are separate. We have to go back to the basics of we came from a little and learned how to make a lot. But it's having everybody do the buy-in, which means starting earlier, letting them understand why you want them to do certain things. And that's building that trust so that when we say, hey, bring your money, we put our money, we trust as a family that we're all on the same page going in the same direction. So it's planning, it's educating, and then it's executing.
Absolutely, absolutely. I like that. I like that. And we can really learn a lot from other cultures that do work together to build intentionally, that do pool their resources together so that everybody wins. Because the reality, you guys, is we can go a lot further together than we can individually. But I think we have gotten to a point where we have, I don't know if you call it been brainwashed. I don't know if we've lost our focus. I don't know if we have become so consumed with our individual selves that we don't understand anymore the value of working together. And a lot of that is mindset. So I'm going to ask this closing question. I'll give each one of you 60 seconds or so to respond to this. Mindset is powerful. What is one mindset about family and money that you hope our listeners and our viewers today will reconsider after today's conversation? I'm going to repeat that again. What is one mindset about family and money you hope our listeners and our viewers will reconsider after our conversation today? Let's see. We'll start with the guest first. Mr. Thompson, I'm going to let you go ahead and respond.
I think the mindset has to be changed that we do have wealth now. Our culture, our history comes from us, a lot of us, not having wealth, not understanding what wealth was. It was just working and buying and accumulating a house, a car, and we didn't come from all of that. So now we have to change our mindset to understand we do have wealth. Maybe not big wealth, but we have wealth. And everything little put together can become something big. So the mindset has to change that we aren't what we used to be, but we're in the game. We're middle class, we're upper middle class, and even those that are not, every little bit makes a difference. I think of learning the seniors, the parents, learning how to change that mindset, learning how to do the grind with staying healthy mentally.
Okay. Nephew, your thoughts?
I would like for, the listeners to just take a moment and focus on teamwork. working together as a family to reach shared money goals. Growth, seeing mistakes as learning steps rather than failures, and patience. A lot of times, we don't have, a lot of times we find ourselves, not having patience. So just wait and plan for future rewards instead of buying things right away. I think if we, focus on teamwork, growth, and patience, that's a tremendous start
Well,
in long-term wealth.
Well, thank you. As we close today's show, I want to leave you with my final thoughts. Collective economics is not about giving up your independence. It's about increasing your family's opportunities. Some of the greatest wealth building stories didn't begin with someone making more money. They began with families making better decisions together. Sometimes the smartest financial move isn't getting a bigger paycheck. Sometimes it's reducing unnecessary expenses, because every expense that flows through some of our homes is not necessary. We don't always need all of those subscriptions and all of those Amazon boxes that flow in our houses. Sometimes it's helping a family member get back on their feet. Sometimes it's staying together for a season so everyone can move further in the future. Our ancestors, they understood. They understood something that many of us have forgotten. They knew that survival wasn't an individual sport. It was a family effort. No, I'm not suggesting that every family should live together. Because to be honest, you guys, I got some folks in my family. It just wouldn't work. It would not work. So I'm not suggesting that, because not every situation is healthy. But perhaps we've been so focused on individual success that we've overlooked incredible power of collective success. Just imagine what could happen if families intentionally shared housing costs, eliminated debt together, purchased homes together, invested together, and passed assets from one generation to the next instead of starting over every generation. Does that sound familiar? Dr. Williams has been talking about this for years. Generational wealth building, learning to trust. Sound familiar? That's how legacies are built. That's how family trees are changed. And that's how communities are transformed. I want to thank my nephew, Mr. Patrick Black, and Mr. Eric Thompson for participating in this important discussion this morning and for helping us to tackle this important conversation. One, quite frankly, that many more of us need to continue in our own families beyond this morning's episode of So Talks Money and More. Thank you guys so much for being a part of this. And I want to thank you, my listening and my viewing audience, for being here today. If today's discussion challenged your thinking, don't let it end here. Don't let it end here. Continue this conversation around your own dinner table. What would that look like? What is our recovery plan? Sure, our children are out on their own doing great, but life happens. People go through hardships. People have mental health breakdowns. People get divorces. Life happens. What does the recovery plan look like for your family? Talk to your family. Ask your parents. Ask your children. Ask yourself. Are we making financial decisions based on wisdom or based on pride? You guys, it's been a pleasure to be here this morning. We are at the beginning of August. Don't blink, because when we look up, we'll be right here knocking on Labor Day. Don't blink. I got to send a special shout out all the way to Lisbon, Portugal. My girl, Miss Ellis, has officially left the US of A and is living her best life over in Lisbon, Portugal. But guess what? She did not forget about Soul Talks Money and More. She's up and tuned in this morning. Until next time, remember that your greatest investment may not be in the stock market. It may not be in real estate. It may very well be, as it should be, in your family. God bless you. Have an amazing week. And remember, we are stronger together. Peace.